The strictest rules on the set of Ted Lasso had nothing to do with football at all. For example, one actor was forced to cover up his gray hair, only to wear a full-on silver wig just 2 seasons later. Nick Mohammed, who played Nate, may be the clearest example of how little control a performer can have over their appearance during a long-running show. Nick already had a little salt and pepper starting to show in his hair when filming first began, but to make the character more convincing, the hair and makeup team painted over it. Darker hair meant that early Nate looked younger, softer, and more vulnerable. As Nate gained power and started turning against Ted, the process went in reverse. More gray was actually painted into his hair during the 2nd season to track the stress, guilt, and anger that was building inside of him. By the 3rd season, his hair was supposed to be so gray that the paint was no longer enough. Nick had to wear a custom wig that took about 40 minutes to put on each day. And what you might not realize is that short wigs are very difficult to hide. And Nick said that the number of pins that they had to use made the experience pretty excruciating. Juno Temple actually dealt with a smaller version of the same continuity problem before shooting season 3. For the SAG Awards, her stylist was set on giving her bangs to match her red carpet look. But cutting a real fringe was completely out of the question.
Whenever I break up with someone, I spend months questioning it, wondering if I made a huge mistake.
Because Juno might have wanted bangs, but Keely definitely didn't. And spoiler alert, she went to the SAG Awards with a fake fringe, so both women got what they wanted. Now, hair was tightly controlled, but the people underneath it mattered just as much. Hannah Waddingham, who plays Rebecca Welton in the series, has said that the production apparently followed a strict no arseholes rule on set. That phrase sounds like a joke, but the idea behind it was completely real. Co-creator Bill Lawrence was renowned for hiring all-rounders, aka both talented and good people. His theory was that when people treat each other well, it translates to their on-screen chemistry, and vice versa. If people are arseholes, even the best acting can't cover that up. So basically, you could be talented, funny, and perfect on camera, but a bad reputation behind the scenes would still get you booted from the final casting of Ted Lasso. The footballers, on the other hand, had much stricter, literal rules. Actors that were auditioning to play any of the AFC Richmond players were asked to send in not only an acting audition tape, but extra footage showing their football abilities. They didn't need to be the next David Beckham, but they did need to have decent control, movement, passing, and shooting if they were going to have any chance of pulling off Premier League believability. Once they were hired, they weren't off the hook either. The players trained together, received individual coaching, and were even given football homework based on their weak spots. Cristo Fernandez, who plays Danny Rojas, was pretty lucky in the fact that he had already played football at a high level before he even joined the cast. While the other cast members, let's just say they had a bit more ground to make up. Now, the odd part is that being able to play freely was only really useful during preparation, not during actual filming. Every major run, tackle, pass, and goal had to be planned and repeated. The actors had to look spontaneous while hitting exact marks. So the Richmond cast had to be good enough to pass as footballers, but then disciplined enough to stop playing naturally whenever the cameras rolled. How about that for a role to follow? Hannah Waddingham faced a very different physical rule. And that was that Rebecca's towering high heels must always stay on, even when other actors were uncomfortable with how short they looked beside her. Waddingham is already tall, standing at 5'11" without high heels on, and Rebecca's shoes pushed her well above the height of many of her scene partners. And she's been vocal about a couple of co-stars actually asking her if she could perform a scene without shoes on. And the answer was a plain and simple no. The heels stayed because Rebecca's height was actually specifically used by showrunners to showcase her power and authority. Jason Sudeikis was completely comfortable having Ted stand below her in height, especially early on in the story for exactly that reason. And Hannah has said this was a pleasant surprise after years of being treated like her height presented a problem rather than solving one. And her shoes weren't the only uncomfortable part of playing Rebecca either. Those famous pink boxes of biscuits became one of the show's sweetest traditions, and yet Hannah hated eating the early versions. But it kind of became a de facto rule that she had to really sell the scene. She described the first biscuits as horribly dry. They pulled the moisture straight out of her mouth while she was expected to keep chewing and deliver clear, witty dialogue. A single scene could need several takes, and Rebecca often ate when she was stressed, so the problem kept returning. The recipe eventually changed, and later the biscuits had more butter and sugar and were far easier to eat. Before that happened though, I find it pretty funny that one of the most comforting props in the entire series was basically making her mouth stop working. And as an actor, that's definitely a no-go.
I agree. Concentrate on the task in hand. Beating Brentford.
It will kill me.
And while food had to stay the same across takes, the general rule of thumb was that the cast should be expecting the wording of a script could change on a dime. Jeremy Swift and James Lance have both described Ted Lasso scripts as malleable, with new versions sometimes arriving on the day of filming. That puts the cast in a very different position than actors on a series such as The Sopranos. On that series, Joseph Ganiscalli, who played Vito, said that those scripts were often prepared well in advance with a very specific delivery expected from the actor. But Ted Lasso demanded another scale. An actor might rehearse a joke, maybe they've settled on a rhythm around one version of the scene, only to receive new lines shortly before the take. A changed sentence might affect the entire mood, so the actor is learning more than just new words. They're having to rebuild the scene in their head, while the crew is just sitting there ready to shoot. The crew also had to rebuild its normal filming methods whenever it entered the Ted Lasso stadium. The real groundskeepers of the stadium where the show was filmed guarded the football pitch and had nearly as strict of rules as Nate. The show was filmed at Selhurst Park, which is the real-life stadium of Premier League team Crystal Palace. Heavy camera rigs, tracks, and large machines were specifically kept off their carefully curated fields. Once you know that, the layout of many of the stadium scenes starts to make much more sense. A lot of the conversations happen on the sidelines, in the tunnel, in the stands, or only a few steps onto the pitch. Those locations gave the show a full stadium backdrop without sending a crowd of workers and equipment across the field.
A beautiful ball in! Barbecue sauce.
For example, when director Zach Braff needed a moving shot on the grass, the crew built a lightweight rickshaw with large, soft tires and a remote camera head. The operator stayed at the side, while the key grip put on football boots and sprinted with the rig. It was light enough to win the groundskeeper's approval, and it worked so well that the production kept using it. And speaking of the club, Richmond also had strict rules. AFC Richmond is a completely fake team, but it needed to look like an old, established, and believable team, while avoiding the appearance of a real one for copyright reasons. And the production may have used Crystal Palace's stadium and chose similar red and blue colors, but it designed separate badges, home kits, away kits, training gear, signs, and overall club details. The design team working on the show had very strict instructions. Football fans needed to recognize the visual language right away, yet Richmond still had to feel like its own institution. That balance became a bit easier after the series gained wider access to Premier League branding and later added Nike kits. But even before that, I'd say they complied pretty perfectly.